Girl, be you. That's all that you can do. Girl, be you. That's all that you can do. Don't be nobody else. Don't be nobody else. Don't be nobody else. Don't be nobody else. Girl.
Hey y'all, and welcome back to the Girl Be You podcast. I am Gigi, your host, and here at this podcast, we are creating a space for you to be your most authentic self in a world full of chaos. Thank you so much for joining me this week on the podcast. I'm so excited to share a topic that is so personal to me in a place in which I am learning to lean into not rushing, but resting. Let's get right into the episode. I feel like now in society, we are in a place where we're often feeling rushed to succeed, rushed to, um, we are feeling rushed to make a decision, rushed to get to this expected end. And if you're anything like me, then you know that that rushed mentality really wears down on your mental. And currently, right now in my life, I am learning how not to rush through life, but to literally be present and embracing the idea of resting. I talk a lot about my upbringing and my childhood. I grew up around all adults. It was me and my sister, and we were often babysat by my grandparents or my aunts or my uncles. And so my life was very much from the viewpoint of adulting. And then we had a great childhood, but it was very much from the grown up perspective. And we had a big family, but I was always of that mindset of being adult like as a child, being the oldest, always watching other people's kids, taking on responsibilities and having an expectation. There was a very rushed mentality, and I internalized a lot of that. And that internalization of being rushed was how I lived my life through my 20s, 30s, and I'm stopping it at 40 because honestly, my mental can't take it. And as I look at societal norms and our culture that we live in, I feel like there is this very rushed way of thinking that we don't give ourselves the grace to live in moments and literally be present. There's a difference for me to take photos to remember things, but then taking photos to remind the world that you did it or show the world that you did it. And I am realizing that the life that I am currently living is the life that I have prayed for. And I realize also that my ability or my need for rushing is causing me to miss out on where I am in the moment, and I'm learning to rest. And I wanted to have this conversation on the podcast because I feel like maybe y'all need to hear that. You need to hear, please stop rushing and learn to rest. And so, of course, I have my notes because I want to stay on topic and I want to share with you guys about how important it is to have this level of rest and not rushing and removing rushing from your lifestyle. And so, when there's a pressure to rush, there is both an external anticipation and an internal anticipation. And again, societal and cultural pressures to achieve certain milestones. Like at 25, you should have this much saved up. And at 30, you should be dating the person that you're going to marry. And by 35, you should already be on child too. Let me tell you something. As a woman who is, I have no problems telling my age because I love telling people that I am 41, girl. 41. And I used to always be rushed with the anticipation, like, okay, I gotta hurry up, get married, hurry up, have these kids, until I realized that someone else is rushing me to something is not going to make me feel fulfilled. I literally had this conversation with some family members, and they were like, gee, you should be having kids. And I was like, I hear you. But I have been the babysitter. uh, changing diapers, making bottles for other people's kids. And I just want to be in the house. I don't want to do none of that. So there's that external expectation to have these milestones, to hit these milestones so that it shows that you've reached this level of success. And then there's the internalization of rushing. I remember my first apartment, writing down all of my goals and what I wanted to see happen. I'm very much a note taker and a list maker, honey. And so I had this list and I was like, I want to do this by 27. I want to be this by 30. And as those years were coming up very fast for me, I realized that I wasn't hitting these markers the way that I thought that I should. And then I got comfortable with the idea that I do not have to live my life like that. And when I took time to think about it, and when I think back on like my 20s being in my little closet writing my notes, I realized that I was not enjoying the moments. I was rushing so quickly that I was not enjoying the moments. And now in my 40s, I look back on that 25-year old, like, girl, slow down. I wish that I could whisper to myself, my 41-year-old self, whisper to my 25-year-old self and say, girl, slow down. Enjoy right here because these are the good old days. And I want that to be something that I tell you, a listener, or even wherever you land in your life, slow down. Slow down. These are the good days. No matter where you land, these are the good days. And then so we see that power or that pressure to rush and keep up with the Joneses mindset, and it just becomes so overwhelming, and it doesn't make for a happy life at all. It makes for such turmoil in your mind. If it makes you not enjoy the moments. I remember my first apartment. It was a studio apartment. And when I tell you I was on the 15th floor, I had a view of the city. I woke up every morning to the sun coming up. I had my little kitchen and, my little closet. And it was, when I think about it, it was the best place. It was one of my most favorite apartments. One, it was mine. And I was able to create a place of peace. But in that apartment, I was always rushing and comparing myself to what other people had. And let me tell you something, those people that I was comparing myself to are miserable now. They were probably miserable then, but I didn't know that. And so that pressure to rush causes you to not enjoy where you are. And so the other side of that is that there is a power of rest. I say this all the time. Growing up, my dad was very much, don't let no grass grow under your feet. Let's keep it moving. Let's keep it going. While you taking a nap, there's things to do. And for much of my life, I think well into, I want to say like maybe mid 30s. It wasn't until I maybe moved to Dallas in 2016 that I started to unravel that mindset and where I embraced learning to rest. That's a long time. And now in my 40s, I lean very heavy on the rest, very heavy on the rest. But it's still in the back of my mind, like I should be doing something, I should be making things happen. And when I don't see those things happening, I'm like, oh, that's because you need to go take a nap, girl. That's what you need to do. And so the power of rest is that rest just isn't physical, right? It just doesn't mean like laying around, but rest means it's emotional and mental and spiritual. I am learning all three of those things at the same time. Emotionally, when you rest, you allow your mind to stop running. Mentally, you allow your mind to stop running. And spiritually, you allow yourself to be calm enough to be poured back into. For me, spiritually, starting my day early with prayer and then going on a walk, for me, that is what sets the tone for my day. That may not work for everybody, but that's what sets the tone for my day. And so I'm learning how important rest is. And rest truly, I feel like when I am resting, when I don't think about like, oh my gosh, how's everything gonna work out? I don't feel as anxious. I have less anxiety attacks. And I don't have the feelings of being super depressed and sad. Because if I'm being honest, a lot of the time that, not lately, but when a couple years ago, I was always like happy, sad and sad, and then don't know what to do because I was not embracing rest. There is a benefit to resting. It allows you to reflect. It allows your body, your mind, and your soul to heal. And you can quiet the noise so that you can have self understanding. When my grandmother passed in 2020, I was very angry. I was mad at myself for leaving the life that I had started to create in Dallas. And I came back to Chicago for the sense of family. And I was like, I'm coming back home because they miss me. So I'm coming back home so I can, create these memories. That was partly true. And it was partly beneficial because I was able to create a lot more memories with my grandmothers before they passed. But then the other part of that is that I moved back with the expectation that family members were going to perceive me being home in a different way. And I was disappointed because of their expectation. You see how I take the responsibility of me being disappointed because I had an expectation of others, of what I thought that they would do for me. And that was not the case. It was complete chaos. After my grandmother died, I was angry, I was upset, and I reacted to things because I wasn't clear. I wasn't getting any rest. And when I entered therapy, my therapist just let me know that my inability to sleep and my inability to like eat and to focus was part of depression, grief, and anxiety. And I realized that I was high functioning in anxiety, but I had made it a way of life. And it wasn't until I started to rest that I started reflecting on my bad behaviors and the way that I was living my life. And I also read this book called Rest is Resistance, which was by Trisha Hersey. An amazing book. And sometimes I always go back to read this because she has such amazing thought processes as it relates to how rest is truly a form of resistance, especially for Black women and Black people in general, because during slavery, rest was like the enemy. There is no sleep. You keep going, you keep going, you keep turning and turning and turning until something happens. You stay out there in the field, you pick that cotton, you do this. And so that followed a lot of our ancestors from slavery into the Jim Crow, into the Great Migration and Jim Crow, and then now it is so entrenched in our beliefs. Like, why are you resting? And so even with between my relationship with my dad and I, the older he gets, he realizes that he has to take a nap. But my thought process of I don't necessarily have to be up at 6 a.m. in the morning. Even though I know that works, sometimes I don't have to do that all the time. It's just ebbs and flows, and you just stay present and you realize what works for you and what doesn't work for you. And so, and then there are practical ways to incorporate rest. Like, I used to always think that it was taking a nap, but it's not. And I learned that in therapy, child. I learned that I practice mindfulness and meditation. I do think for me, when I am still and when I have moments where I just take time to meditate and think through things, I feel better. I can face the day with a different perspective. Deep breathings, gratitude journaling. For me, let me tell you something. When I learn to be in a place of saying thank you, it makes me feel so good. I always try to practice. I'm thankful to have a house. I'm thankful to have a home where there is peace. I'm thankful to be in a marriage where I'm not comparing myself to anyone else, but I'm thankful that we have friendship communication. I'm thankful for my family being alive. Just things like that will change your perspective drastically. Because if you keep going further and further and further down into things aren't going right, child, you always gonna be upset. You always gonna be depressed, child. Go find things, go touch some grass and learn to be grateful, okay? Um, there are a couple things that I think is important on your journey from resting to from on your journey. I think there are a couple things that are important while you take your journey from rushing to resting, and that is leaning into being present. Be present in the moment, regardless. Tell yourself to calm down, and sometimes it just takes you a moment to be like, "Listen, G, calm down." And I have to do that often because I am a control freak. I like being in control of everything. I want to know where everything's going to go. How is it going to go? How is this going to do? Bah, 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 bah. And I have to learn to be present. So, showing up authentically, not putting on a mask, taking that mask off and saying, I'm going to laugh. I'm going to make my jokes, even if they're corny. I'm probably going to say something off the wall, okay? And my true friends know that I will say something absolutely insane. Um, and making mindful decision making, like choosing decisions based on your current needs than external timelines. Like right now in this moment, this is what I'm going to do. I'm going to have a Cinnabon. I know that sounds crazy, but sometimes I will go over to the mall and I would just slowly walk. I'm not in a rush, but I just want that little Cinnabon, that mini Cinnabon. And I want it to be fresh out that oven because I'm making decisions for currently right now for what I desire. And it's not about, and I don't even let myself go far into like, CG, that's how you gonna gain weight, because that is negative self-talk that I have heard my entire life. And I'm gonna tell you, that's some bullshit, okay? It is. Also, another thing to lean away from rushing and lean into resting is letting go of comparison. I cannot tell you how many times I would go to events and functions and I couldn't even enjoy myself because before I got there, I was comparing like what my hair looked like to the other girls, what my outfit looked like to the other girls. And I never truly got a chance to enjoy myself because I was so in my head and so just, oh my gosh. Like, listen, comparison kills. I always say that it kills. It's the thief of joy, and you never get a chance to enjoy who you are, where you're going, when you're always comparing yourself to people and people who don't even matter. Okay, practicing self-compassion. Give yourself grace. I'm saying this to you as I say it to myself. I am learning every day to give myself grace because who I was 7 years ago is not the person that I am today. And I am so thankful to God that I am not that person who I was 7 years ago. And it's not a knock to who I was. It just means that I've matured. I've given myself grace. I've grown so much. And I promise you, if you take the time to do that, you will realize, man, I really have changed. And I've really gone in the direction of my best self. And also, leaning away from rushing to resting is trusting your journey. Trust where you are in your life. Your journey is your journey. I always reference like your journey as being a book because y'all know I like to read. Okay. So, so your journey is like a book. When I read a good book, it's like chapters that are filled with like so many different twists and turns. Like, that probably wasn't a great decision, but oh, you turned it around right here. Okay, she hit a low spot right here, but oh, she made it through. And so I think that is what has to happen. Like, you have to just lean into and trust your journey. Enjoy where you're going and find peace and so much uncertainty. If I can just stay there for a moment. Baby, when I tell you uncertainty is probably the theme of my life right now. You got to go over to the Patreon to get the real nitty gritty, baby, because there is so much uncertainty. I don't know what's going to happen. I don't know how it's going to happen. And there are no um previews to what's going to happen. I'm just out here. I'm just out here. And it is very uncertain. But you got to trust living in that place of uncertainty and just being yourself. Here are some practical things that I want you to take away from the conversation that we're having. And if you're listening, you can jot it down or play it back or pause it, girl, because there are only 3 that I have. Create your personal timeline. Like, what does growth look like for you? Define what success and growth looks like for you. It doesn't have to be anything crazy, but what does that look like for you? How do you want to show up for yourself? Mind you, I said show up for yourself and not for other people. How do you want to show up? Incorporate rest into your routine. Every day we have an opportunity to embrace rest. And I would like to invite you to rest more and rush less. You rest, it will show up in ways that you can't even imagine. It will change your very countenance. It will change your perspective. It will change how you interact with your friends and your family because your mind is able to rest. Picture your mind being like a phone. Baby, you got to turn that phone off. And not off like, oh, I'm not on it. I mean off like power it down. Give it a minute to breathe and come back on. Because you'll start glitching out, okay? So your mind needs that rest, okay? And stay focused on being present. Be present. Even if it's hard, even if it's like, but there's so much going on. Yes, I know. And in the climate that we live in, there is so much to be all over the place about. But make a decision to be present. With this election, and especially with the climate of everything, I am choosing what I take in, how much I take in, and when I'm going to turn that phone off. Because, baby, if you are scrolling, reading, you are listening to the opinions of so many other people. And I want you to be at a place of rest in your mind and in your heart, because none of those external things even matter in the real scheme of things, okay? So create a timeline for what you want success to look like for you and break down your goals into smaller pieces. Just give it an hour every day. I'm going to show up every day an hour. I'm going to, research for 30 minutes. Just small pieces. Stop feeling like you got to take over the world. Incorporate rest into your timeline. Schedule time to relax, to clear your mind, to do something you enjoy, and focus on staying present. Stop living in the future. Stop living in the past and choose to just stay present right here in this moment. Enjoy that moment. Enjoy it. Because what you're living through right now are the good old days, even if they're the worst day that you've ever faced in your life. This right here, these are the good old days. You with this quote: your journey is uniquely yours. There is no need to rush. Embrace rest, stay present, and trust the process. Y'all, thank you so much for joining me on this week's episode of No More Rushing. Let's rest. I hope that there was something that was said in this podcast that will inspire you to lean into rest and not rushing. If you're not already, go follow me on Instagram, GJEE_girlBU. And if you want to join the book club, you can do that by visiting the website at www.girlbu.com. And of course, there are so many things that I have planned and so much content that is already over on the Patreon. So go visit the Patreon. And if you want to see the visuals of this podcast, girl, we got to see the visuals of this podcast. Go over to my YouTube channel, Girl Be You. Y'all, thank you so much for joining me. Make sure that you like, share, and subscribe to this podcast. And if you're feeling wonderful and if this podcast has impacted you, make sure you leave a note. And thank you so much for joining me. Until next time, bye, y'all.
Girl, be you. That's all that you can do. Girl, be you. That's all that you can do. Don't be nobody else. Don't be nobody else. Don't be nobody else. Don't be